Revival of the soul through boundless love. Dear brothers and sisters, today I want to share with you a message about the greatest power in the universe, the boundless love of God. This love is the foundation of all things, the source of life, the light that illuminates the darkness, the spark that lights the fire of hope in our hearts. Today I will tell you about a miracle that is present in every moment of our lives, but which we often take for granted. It is a message about the greatest power in the universe, God's infinite love. Think for a moment, what is love? What is the love of God? It is not just a feeling or an emotion. It is the foundation of all things, the bedrock upon which our world stands. It is the source of life that nourishes our souls, the light that dispels the darkness of our fears and doubts, the spark that ignites the fire of hope in our hearts. I will tell you a story. A man, a very ordinary man, was in trouble, in a darkness that seemed to him completely endless. And this sadness and pain drove the man to complete despair. There was no one who loved him, no one who would remember him. One day, in the darkest hour, when everything seemed lost, this man found the strength to stand up and step forward. He was alone, his heart was filled with despair, and he, having taken that first step, did not know where to go next. And it was at that moment, it was then that he remembered God, his love, the love of God. That thought became a beacon for him in the darkness. He realized that even in the most difficult times he was not alone, because God, his love, was always there for him. And this knowledge, this sense of divine love, gave him the strength to go on despite all the obstacles. For him, God's love became his support and refuge in life. Let us ask ourselves a question. How can we experience this love in our lives? How can we become part of it? The answer is simple: by opening our heart. God's love is always there, but to truly experience it, we must be open. We must realize it and believe it. We must be open to change, to forgiveness, to new beginnings. We are all searching for meaning, searching for light, for hope. And it is God's love that can be the light at the end of the tunnel that guides us. It can be the spark that will light a fire in our hearts and help us to see the world in a new way. Open your hearts to this boundless love. Let it fill our lives with light, joy, and peace. And let this journey to the depths of our souls begin right now. We live in a world that sometimes seems full of chaos and uncertainty. Challenges await us at every turn, and sometimes these challenges seem insurmountable. Suffering comes upon us like waves trying to knock us down, and in these moments the world around us seems devoid of light and color. In such times, when despair envelops us like a dense fog and darkness seems to engulf everything around us, it is important to remember the indestructible power that is always with us, the love of God. Let me share a story about a man who once faced such difficulties that his life seemed meaningless to him. He struggled with his inner demons, feeling completely alone in his grief. However, in the darkest moment of his life, in that impenetrable darkness, he found this light, the light of God's love. It was the only light, the only hope that flowed within him. This realization did not come to him all at once, but gradually, like dawn slowly dispelling the darkness of the night. He began to notice little signs and wonders in his life that reminded him that he was not alone. This love of God became a ray of light for him, penetrating through every barrier. It revitalized his soul, healed his wounds, and restored his lost hope. In the darkness of his life, God's love was the only thing that sustained him and gave him hope in life. So why do we often forget this strength when we need it so much? Perhaps because in a storm, it is easy to lose sight of the beacon that points the way. But let's ask ourselves a question. How can we stay connected to this love even when there is darkness all around us? How can we make sure we don't lose that ray of light in the darkest of times? The answer lies in our ability to open our heart and soul. In moments of despair, when all seems lost, It is important to stop and listen to the quiet whisper in the depths of our heart that reminds us of God's unconditional and eternal love. This love can revitalize the soul, heal wounds, and restore lost hope. It is there in joy, in sorrow, and in the silence of our loneliness. It is always with us, reminding us that after every night comes the dawn. Let us together find comfort in this truth. Let us remind ourselves and each other that in spite of all difficulties and trials, God's love is an eternal beam of light that never goes out, a lamp that lights our way in the darkest of times. This love is like an anchor that holds us up when storms rage around us, like a warm fire that keeps us warm on cold nights. It is the one love we always have. We all seek support and comfort when we face difficulties. Sometimes we turn to friends, family, books or music. But it is important to remember that the highest form of comfort and support comes from the love of God. It is always available to us, ready to embrace us with its warmth and light, even when we feel utterly alone. So how can we deepen our understanding and perception of this love? One way is through prayer or meditation. Time spent in silence, listening and feeling God's presence in our lives. Another way is to share love with others. By showing compassion, kindness and understanding, we become channels of God's love through which it can flow into the world. There was a woman who suffered for many years from loneliness and lack of purpose in life. She felt lost in a world full of pain and suffering. There was no one around who needed her. But one day, walking down the street, she saw a man who was in a wheelchair and it was very hard for him to climb up the steps, and she helped him. And she came out of her shell and started helping weaker and vulnerable people. She began volunteering at a local homeless shelter where she met many people suffering and seeking comfort. Through her service, she found that the more she shared love with others, the more she felt God's love in her own heart. It was a revelation that changed her life. She realized that God's love not only heals us, but also multiplies when we share it with others. In conclusion, I want to say that even in the most difficult times, when darkness seems to consume everything around us, we are not alone. God's love is a ray of light that is always with us, a source of hope and revival. Let us open our hearts to this love. Let us seek it and share it with others, and then we will see our world become brighter. Soul revitalization through boundless love. These words sound like a melody that invites us to deep self-discovery and change. But what does it really mean to open our hearts to this transformation? And how can we be sure we are on the path that leads to true soul healing? Imagine a moment when you are standing on the shore of a lake in the early morning. The water is calm and you see the first rays of the sun gently touching its surface, creating thousands of sparkling lights. You venture out for a swim and slowly enter the water. The cold water envelops your body, but as you sink deeper, you feel the tension and fatigue leave you. The water washes over every part of your body, and you feel completely renewed when you emerge. The same process happens when we open our hearts to God's love. It may seem scary in the beginning, especially if we are used to keeping our feelings and emotions locked away. But when we take this step, God's love begins to wash and heal our souls, just as water washes the body. This process of healing and rebirth can be slow and sometimes painful, for we have to face deep wounds and fears. However, it is through these trials that we gain strength and wisdom. Can each of us experience this rebirth? How can we overcome the doubts and fears that prevent us from opening ourselves to boundless love? Let's take an example from life. A man who had experienced deep losses and disappointments could not find the strength to forgive and let go of the past for a long time. He felt imprisoned in the dungeon of his resentments and bitterness. One day, after much thought, he decided to take a step toward change. He began slowly, with prayer and reflection, trying to learn to accept and love himself as he was. In time, to his surprise, he felt the invisible shackles begin to loosen. The love he began to feel for himself spread to others. He discovered that he was able to forgive, and this transformation gave his life new meaning and purpose. This story reminds us that soul revitalization through boundless love is available to anyone who is willing to open their heart and accept this challenge. But how can we begin this journey to transformation? Perhaps the first step is to simply stop and listen to ourselves. In our endless pursuit of success and achievement, we often forget the importance of inner peace, the quiet voice of the soul that speaks to us through sensations, emotions, and intuition. We live in a world that values activity and results, but sometimes the most meaningful changes happen when we are simply in a state of being rather than doing. Meditation, prayer, nature walks, or even quiet moments of morning coffee are all ways to open the door to our inner peace and allow God's love to enter our lives. When we begin to appreciate these moments of silence and reflection, we may encounter different emotions and feelings that have long been hidden in the depths of our souls. This can be a painful and difficult process, but this is where God's love can manifest its healing power. Remember, there is no wound it cannot heal and no darkness it cannot illuminate. Do you think you are ready to take this step? Are you ready to open your heart and give yourself a chance at true soul revitalization? This journey may be unlike anything you've ever experienced, and it may lead you to discoveries about yourself that you didn't even realize you had. I want to share another story with you. There was a man who spent his entire life seeking happiness in external accomplishments, career, money, success. However, despite all his accomplishments, he felt empty and lonely. In search of answers, he began practicing meditation and gradually learned to listen to his inner self. Over time, he discovered that true happiness and fulfillment came from within, from a deep connection with God and from loving himself and others. This realization dramatically changed his life. Maybe this man's story sounds familiar to you. Maybe this is the sign you've been looking for, a call to action to begin your journey to soul revitalization through boundless love. Opening your heart to God's love is an invitation to the most amazing journey of your life. It is a journey to your true self, to a deep peace and joy that is independent of external circumstances. It is a journey where you will discover that true power and beauty lie within you, and that every moment of life is an opportunity for growth, healing, and transformation. But how do you maintain this state of openness and readiness for soul revitalization? One way is to find a community of like-minded people. People who are also seeking deep inner transformation and healing through love can be your support and inspiration. Together you can share your stories, successes and challenges, supporting and enriching each other along the way. It is also important to remember that the journey to soul revitalization is not a constant state of bliss and joy. There will be moments of doubt, fears, and setbacks. In these moments, it is especially important to be kind to yourself, to practice self-compassion, and to remind yourself that every step along the way, even a step backward, is part of your growth and development. One way to deepen your awareness and connection to infinite love is to turn to sacred texts, meditations, or prayers that speak to you. These spiritual practices can be a beacon of light in times of doubt and uncertainty, reminding you of the unconditional love and support that is always with you. Finally, it's important to remember that every moment is a new opportunity for soul rebirth. It doesn't matter how many times you have fallen or deviated from your path, there is always an opportunity to start again. Now, limitless love knows no limitations of time or conditions. It is always available to you, ready to wash and heal your soul. Remember that the rebirth of your soul through limitless love is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. It is a journey to yourself, to your true essence, which enriches and transforms every aspect of your life. Perhaps now is the moment when you are ready to open your heart to this marvelous transformation. Remember, there is no depth from which God's love cannot reach you. There is no loss or despair that is stronger than His love. As we open our hearts to this love, we open the door to a marvelous transformation of our lives. God's love knows no conditions. It does not require us to be perfect, because it accepts us as we are, with all our weaknesses and mistakes. There is no room for fear in this love because it fills us with unwavering faith and confidence. As we reflect more deeply on how God's love can reach us in every depth, it is worth asking ourselves a few questions. How often do we feel lost in the darkness of our trials and difficulties? How many times have we found ourselves in situations where all hope seems lost? And in those moments when we feel most desperate and alone, are we really alone? Or is God's love still with us, pulling us back to the light? God's love, like a true torch in the darkness, not only lights our way back to hope, but also strengthens our faith that healing and restoration are possible. But what does this mean for us practically? How can we open our hearts to this pervasive love when our experiences often cause us to doubt and build walls to protect ourselves from perceived disappointments? The answer may lie in the realization that trusting in God's love is a choice. It is a decision to open our hearts again and again, even when we are afraid to be vulnerable. It is a recognition that despite our own imperfections and mistakes, we are still worthy of love and forgiveness. But how can we begin this process? How can we learn to trust that unconditional love when our experiences in the world so often teach us otherwise? Perhaps the first step is prayer or meditation aimed at opening the heart. Maybe it's finding a community that shares similar views of love and support, where we can share our fears and hopes, learning from others how they find a way to trust in God's love. Or it can simply be a quiet reflection on those moments in our lives when, seemingly out of nowhere, help or comfort appeared, reminding us that we are never alone. It is important to remember that the process of opening our hearts to God's love is not a one-time event, but rather an ongoing journey of self-discovery and healing. It is a journey in which we learn to see ourselves through God's eyes, unconditionally loved and valued beings, capable of transformation and growth in love. As we open our hearts to this love, we truly open the doors to a miraculous transformation of our lives. We begin to see that there is no loss or despair that is greater than His love. But it takes time and patience to fully accept and experience that love. It is a process in which we learn to let go of our fears, prejudices, and expectations to make room for something much greater and more powerful. It is not always easy. After all, in the process we are confronted with the darkest corners of our being. Those aspects of our life and personality that we would prefer to leave unseen. But that is what transformation is all about, recognizing and accepting our vulnerability in the face of infinite love. Opening our hearts to God's love also means opening them to love ourselves and others. It is teaching to see in each person a reflection of this divine love that allows us to build deeper and more sincere relationships. This doesn't mean that all of our relationships will be free of conflict or difficulty, but it does give us the opportunity to practice forgiveness, compassion, and understanding on a deeper level. How can we deepen our understanding and connection to this love? Perhaps one way is to engage in spiritual practices that allow us to experience God's presence in our lives. This could be reading sacred texts, participating in religious rituals, meditation, or prayer. It is important to find the form that speaks specifically to you and allows you to feel closer to God. It is also important to create space in your life for silence and reflection. In today's world, filled with noise and hustle and bustle, we often don't have time to simply stop and listen to our inner voice. But it is in silence that we can most clearly hear the whispers of God guiding and comforting us. Accepting God's love into our lives is an invitation to a journey of discovery and transformation. It is a journey that requires us to be sincere before ourselves and before God, ready for change and new possibilities. On this path, we not only gain a deep understanding of love, but we also learn to be a source of that love for the world around us. As we open our hearts to God's love, we not only transform our lives, but we contribute to the transformation of the world around us. We become the light that illuminates the darkness and the love that heals wounds. We become an example of how boundless love can transform not only individual lives, but entire communities and even the world at large. Along this journey, we also discover that God's love works through us, giving us the strength and wisdom to overcome personal challenges and to help others. We begin to realize that every action we take out of love matters and can be a source of hope for someone in despair. This realization infuses our lives with new meaning and purpose. When we talk about opening our hearts to God's love, we also mean a willingness to see and recognize His love in our daily lives. It may be in the beauty of nature, in the kindness of a stranger, in the peace and tranquility we experience in quiet moments of reflection, or in the miracles that occur when we least expect them. As we recognize these expressions of love, we learn not only to receive, but also to give, spreading warmth and light to the world around us. This journey to receiving and spreading God's love also requires us to learn how to forgive. Forgiveness frees us from the heavy chains of the past and allows us to move forward with a light heart. It is not always easy, but when we forgive, we free ourselves and open our hearts to even more love and light. As we open our hearts to God's love, we find true peace within ourselves. This peace is not dependent on external circumstances or material prosperity. It is a peace that comes from a deep conviction that we are loved and cared for, that we are protected, and that our lives have eternal value and meaning. Step by step, as we open our hearts to a love that surpasses all understanding, we begin to live a life filled with light, joy, and peace. We become living testimony of how great love can change everything. Let us not contain this love within ourselves. Share it with others. Spread the light that has been given to you. Let every word and every act be a reflection of divine love. This is how, step by step, we can change the world around us, filling it with light, peace, and harmony. Let this day be the beginning of a new path for each of us, the path O.